Genres of Literature by Victoria Allen. What is a genre? Well, a genre is a category or kind of literature that has certain characteristics. So first let's talk about fiction. Fiction is prose writing that tells an imaginary story in the form of a short story or novel. So, if fiction is an imaginary story, for example, a story about a little girl and a little boy who are 4 years old having a baby or growing a beard is an imaginary story. So that would be fiction! Ding, 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 ding. Now let's move on. What about certain types of fiction? There are many different types of fiction. One example is realistic fiction. Realistic fiction is a type of fiction that tells an imaginary story about characters and places that could actually exist and events that could actually happen. So it's still an imaginary story, but it's things that could happen in real life. For example, a story about two boys playing checkers after school is something that could actually happen. So it is realistic fiction! Now let's talk about one more type of fiction called fantasy. Fantasy is a type of literature that takes place in an unreal, imaginary world characterized by magical or supernatural elements. Ooh! So, for example, a story about a fairy who makes things disappear, that would be a story that was fantasy because it takes place in an unreal world and it has a magical element, which is a fairy. So now that we've learned about imaginary stories, what about real stories that really happened? This genre of literature is called nonfiction. Nonfiction is the type of writing that tells about real people, places, and events. Examples of nonfiction include essays, diaries, letters, news stories, biographies, and autobiographies. Now, an autobiography is a story of a person's life written by that person. So, the author who's writing the story is writing a book about his or herself. Alright, so a biography is the story of a person's life written by another person. So, the author of a story is writing about another person's life.